Okay, so taking advantage of a break in the storms here, I'm at Rockaway Beach in Pacifica. You may recognize this scene. I painted here before, but this is nice because it's protected from the wind, and it's one of my favorite spots. I'll probably zoom in on this section. I like featuring these rocks out here, and occasionally the sun will come out and there's a nice cast shadow on the water. My usual palette of colors here. I'm using liquid as my medium, and I'm painting on an 11 by 14 inch gessoed panel. All right, so I'm toning in burnt sienna. I haven't been toning lately, but today, because the cliffs in the background are kind of a reddish hue, kind of similar to this, I decided that I'm going to tone. So I'm also sketching using burnt sienna. I'm just thinning this with odorless mineral spirits, just playing around. I'm not getting specific. You know, there's this rock that's right out here. I want that. But once I get the basic shapes in place, then I can become more specific. But I want to make sure that, you know, the arrangement looks appealing. And I'm still not sure about this. This is too low. So, wipe it out. Some people sketch using charcoal or whatever, but I find it's just as easy to use burnt sienna. And then all it does, like if I wipe it out, it just adds to the tone. I think I want the horizon higher. And I do want this rock out here. But I want to keep these rocks up kind of like this. Come down. In other words, this line here will be on kind of a third of the, you know, panel using rule of thirds. Kind of rocks come out a bit and then up like that. I don't usually like running, you know, cliffs off the top, but I think that might be okay. It's not really strong light, but I can see a shadow cast out here, so I'll sort of quickly sketch in where that shadow is. Something like that, and that shadow would be here. All right, so my camera blew over and I walked away from the panel, took a look, and I decided I didn't like it. It wasn't dynamic enough. I want to focus more on this rock right here, which is out there. Kind of zoom in on some of the wave activity. Even if I don't get a, you know, good painting, I feel like I really enjoy the process of exploration, or just trying to come up with something that I find is exciting or interesting. And so if I'm not getting that effect, I try to be honest with myself right up front and wipe it out, start over. Even if I have to do it 3 or 4 times or 5 or whatever, even if I come out and all I do is do sketches and wipe them out, that's fine. You know, it's all part of the process of kind of figuring out, you know, what sort of compositions and what sort of approach to your painting excites you. So I feel like this is better. And then it's kind of zooming in on the shadow shape here, which runs right off of the panel and then comes back this way. And with a smaller panel like this, an 11 by 14, it's kind of nice to do a zoomed in view that'll kind of stand out across the room, even though the panel is fairly small. All right, so mixing up a dark using ultramarine, alizarin crimson, and some burnt sienna. And I like to keep the darks transparent, more luminous. All right, and I'm gonna sketch out like the shadow shape that's on this rock. So this is all in shadow right here. There's quite a bit of light on this rock out here. Most of these rocks here are completely in shadow. Mostly darks around, you know, the water line. And then it goes more up into like sort of a burnt sienna color. All right, putting a little more burnt sienna in the mix here. And as usual, I'm gonna try to, you know, construct this painting around simple shapes, or use simple shapes as the foundation. All right, so for the shadow on the white water, I'm using titanium white, ultramarine blue, and some dioxazine purple. And I've lost the light again, but I can kind of remember what the pattern was. And also I'm just using what I'm seeing out there as, you know, inspiration. So it's One of the nice things about seascapes or landscapes is you can just use what you see as abstract ideas or shapes to inspire you, but you don't have to stay exactly true to it. I mean, obviously everything is in constant motion, and I'll be breaking up these shapes with delicate shifts in value and temperature, but trying to maintain the overall design. All right, for the sky, I'm using titanium white, ultramarine blue, and a touch of phthalo blue. When I first started painting, I didn't think a lot about design. I guess I was just more concerned with just making sure the drawing was accurate or mixing good colors or getting a convincing feeling of light. It wasn't until later that I started realizing that if the composition wasn't good, none of that stuff mattered. All right, so next I think I'll put in the dark water out here, which is sort of this gray-green color. I'm using ultramarine blue, titanium white, a bit of burnt sienna, and cadmium yellow medium. And this may be a bit dark at the moment, but I can lighten that up. You know, I'll often put sky reflections on top of the water, so that's gonna, you know, like I said, that'll lighten it up, and it's nice to have some of these darker gray greens underneath the sky reflections. All right, so titanium white with a touch of dioxazine purple. All right, so at this point I step back, take a look, and yeah, I kind of like the patterns in here. And I do like the shapes. So for the portion of rock that's in the light, I've mixed up sort of a mid-tone value rust color, almost, with burnt sienna and ultramarine blue and a touch of cadmium red light. Keeping this transparent for the moment as well. I've been using a number 6 natural bristle flat, but I'm going to switch over to a number 4 synthetic flat. This allows me to get a little bit more control, be a little more precise, which will be helpful when, you know, kind of indicating some of these rocks along the water line. All right, so I'm going to start reinforcing the darks on the rock in the distance, and I'm adding a bit of titanium white and ultramarine blue to create a little atmosphere. All right, so now I'm working into these shapes, looking for little shifts in value and temperature, but I'm trying to be careful not to, you know, break up the design here. And there are little bits of sort of dark, you know, dark areas along this edge. You know, sometimes when I come and paint, I'll sort of exaggerate effects, and then other times I'll try to, you know, maybe play things down a little bit or subdue things, you know, if that's the effect I'm seeing. So there's a close-up just to give you an idea of sort of the variety that I look for. Cooler darks down here, then it warms up a bit. Blue up here. All right, mixing up some color for the whitewater in shadow, just using ultramarine blue, dioxazine purple, and titanium white. It's important to keep the value of this, you know, of the shadows dark enough that it looks like it's in shadow, but then light enough that I get strong contrast with the rocks. Because if you look out here, it's pretty strong contrast there between the rocks and the shadow, the white water that's in shadow. And I do see some kind of bits of green in here as well, so I'm going to add that. But for now, just kind of adding the bluish tones. All right, so here is the finished product. I'll mention a couple things here that I found sort of challenging. You know, I noticed that there was strong contrast between the shadow portion of the water here and the rocks. So I really had to push the darks in these rocks to, you know, allow for that contrast. And yet I also wanted contrast between the shadow portion of the water and the light portion. So that balance between those dark rocks, the shadow portion of the water, and the light portion of the water, I felt it had to be just right in order for it to read as light. So that was something that, you know, I was particularly careful about. And I wanted to get color into these cliffs, but again, I wanted to make sure that they were dark enough that this shape stood out against the background. I did push the warmth on this rock right here in the light portion just to sort of draw the eye out to this rock. The first two compositions I did, I wasn't clear about what it was that I wanted to capture in the scene. And then after looking at it for a while, I decided, you know, I really do like this rock here and the relationship between the rock and the land here, and this whitewater shadow. So maybe I'll zoom in on this particular part of the scene. And that's something that's really important to do when you get to a place. You know, sometimes we look at a scene and we think, oh, that's really nice. I'm just going to paint it. But are we composing in such a way that we're featuring, you know, the elements that we really appreciate? All right, I went with vertical strokes in the sky, and then, you know, tried to have some directional strokes in the water as well. But the paint is not particularly thick, except actually in the, you know, in the lights here. I kind of loaded up the lights, but the darks or the shadow shapes are fairly thin and transparent. All right, so I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you'd like to see some extra videos and help support the channel, there's a Patreon link down below. I got a bunch of extra videos on there. Last video I did was a review of the Edward Hopper show at the Whitney Museum in New York City, so check it out. Other than that, stay creative, and I'll see you guys in the next video.